This video was created for educational purposes only.
In the quiet suburbs of Long Island, a haunting mystery unfolded, captivating the nation's attention. This is the story of the Long Island serial killer, a chilling tale that spans over a decade, shrouded in darkness and unanswered questions. As the body count rose, a community found itself gripped by fear, desperate for justice and closure. Join us as we delve into the disturbing facts and delve into the tangled webs of this unsolved case, where secrets lurk beneath the surface, and the search for truth continues to this day. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the Long Island serial killer operated with a meticulous and sinister precision. The first unsettling discovery occurred in December 2010, when the remains of 4 young women were found along the remote stretch of Ocean Parkway, near Gilgo Beach. It was a horrifying revelation that sent shockwaves through the community and initiated one of the largest and most complex investigations in Long Island's history. As law enforcement delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a grim pattern. The victims, most of whom were young women involved in sex work, had vanished without a trace, their lives tragically cut short. The killers seemed to possess an unnerving ability to evade capture and leave behind minimal evidence, leaving investigators on a frustrating and relentless pursuit of justice. Over the years, additional remains were discovered in the vicinity, further deepening the enigma surrounding the Long Island serial killer. The investigation expanded to include possible links to other unsolved cases, leading to the chilling realization that this elusive predator may be responsible for more than just the known victims. Amidst the darkness, a dedicated team of detectives, forensic experts, and profilers tirelessly worked to unravel the mysteries that surrounded this case. They meticulously combed through evidence, interviewed witnesses, and explored countless leads, hoping to bring an end to the reign of terror that gripped Long Island. As we embark on this journey into the depths of the Long Island serial killer's reign, we must confront the chilling reality that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. Join us as we navigate the intricate web of clues, explore the lives of the victims, and seek to shed light on one of the most haunting and perplexing unsolved cases in recent history. Our story starts with a desperate 911 call at 4:51 a.m. on the fateful early morning hours of May 2, 2010. When dispatchers got an alarming call from a young woman reporting an assault in progress. The call lasted a whole 23 minutes and was cut short before dispatchers or the authorities could respond to the scene. The caller sounded like she was in distress and had stated, "Help me, they are trying to kill me." When dispatchers asked if they knew their attacker, all she would say is that it was a client of hers. Dispatchers were able to get a rough location of the assault, and the caller's name: Shannon Gilbert. Shannon Gilbert was a young woman from Jersey City, New Jersey, who went missing on May 1, 2010. And little did anyone know at the time, her disappearance would lead to the discovery of multiple bodies on Long Island, New York. In its early days, it became known as the Long Island serial killer. Disturbingly, a frantic 911 call from Shannon herself, filled with terror and desperation, hinted at the horrors she faced. The chilling words she uttered, "They're trying to kill me," remain etched in the collective memory of those following this case. Yet, when police arrived, Shannon was nowhere to be found, leaving behind only questions and an escalating sense of dread. Days turned into weeks, and weeks morphed into months as the search for Shannon intensified. The efforts to locate her led investigators to a grim discovery that would send shockwaves throughout the community and beyond. Police searching alongside of Ocean Parkway in Oak Beach found their first bit of human remains on December 11, 2010. At first, police were searching for the missing Shannon Gilbert, the 24-year-old street worker that made that skin-chilling 23-minute call for help. Officers were dispatched to the area but couldn't find any trace of Shannon. It seemed like authorities were already too late. Shannon and the assailant were both gone. Just a month after the initial disappearance, the Suffolk County Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau asked Officer John Malia to search for Gilbert with his trained cadaver dog, a shepherd named Blue. Over the couple of summer months of 2010, Malia unsuccessfully searched the gated beach community where Gilbert had last been spotted. But the officer would make a second attempt on December 11, 2010, trying to stay close to the shoulder of the parkway. Malia said he conducted his search the same way the FBI conducted their searches, stating that FBI data indicated that dumped bodies are frequently found close to roadways. But he never thought his search of the parkway would turn up 4 sets of different remains. Malia's cadaver dog alerted to a scent which the pair tracked to a skeleton in a disintegrating burlap bag. The remains were later identified as Melissa Barthelomy's. Police discovered 3 more bodies while searching the scene for more evidence. The 4 sets of remains recovered that day are now known as the Gilgo 4. The bodies of the 4 victims, Maureen Brainerd, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman and Amber Costello, which all were found approximately 500 feet from each other, which indicated that they had a serious problem. They realized they had stumbled on the dumping grounds of a serial killer. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was from Norwich, Connecticut, and was only 25 years young at the time of her disappearance. July the 9th of 2007 would be the last time anyone would see her alive. Sources say she had told her friend she was planning on spending the day in New York City. And just like that, she was never seen again. The mother of 2 worked as an escort that would advertise her business on the website Craigslist. She did it to support her children and to pay the mortgage on her house. She had been out of the sex business for about 7 months, but she returned to the work in order to pay her bills after receiving an eviction notice. Her body was found in December of 2010. Sarah Carnes, a friend of Barnes, had received a phone call shortly after Barnes's disappearance from a man with an unfamiliar phone number. The man stated he had recently seen Barnes. He said she was alive and that she was living in a whorehouse somewhere in Queens, New York. He refused to tell Carnes his name, and couldn't give her the precise location of where the whorehouse was located. He then told Carnes he would call her back to give her the address, but that call would never come. When she initially went missing, she was employed at the Super 8 motel in Manhattan. And it's worth noting, as she left work on the night of July 9, 2007, she had called a friend from Connecticut to tell her she had plans to meet a client outside of the motel. She was never seen or heard from again. Barnes was described as a very petite woman, weighing only 105 pounds, and coming in at a height of only 4 feet 10 inches. Let's move on to another victim by the name of Melissa Bartholomew. Melissa Bartholomew was a 24-year-old woman that originated out of Erie County, New York, that disappeared on July the 12th of 2009. She had been running her escorting business off of Craigslist just like some of the other victims. And at that time she had been operating out of her apartment in the Bronx, in New York. After meeting a client, she made a deposit of $900 into her bank account. Shortly after, she tried calling an ex-boyfriend, but got no answer. After that, she would never be seen or heard from again. About 1 week later, and lasting for 5 weeks, her teenage sister Amanda received a series of vulgar, mocking, and insulting calls from a man who may have been the killer using Melissa Bartholomew's cell phone. The caller asked if Amanda was a whore like her sister. The calls were disgusting and disturbing. Eventually, the caller got bored degrading and disrespecting Amanda and her older missing sister, so he got pleasure from telling Amanda how her sister was dead and that he was going to enjoy watching her body rot. The police would be notified of the caller, and police would be able to trace some of the calls to Madison Square Garden, Midtown Manhattan, and Massapequa, but were unable to determine who was making them. Bartholomew's mother noted that there were a lot of calls to Manorville from her daughter's phone around the time of her disappearance. Barthélemy was also described as a very petite woman, weighing only 95 pounds, and coming in at a height of only 4 feet 10 inches. Her description also matches the profile type of the other victims. Megan Waterman was a 22-year-old woman from South Portland, Maine, who disappeared on June the 6th of 2010. She too was running her escorting business off of Craigslist. Just one day earlier she told her boyfriend she was going out for the night, that she would call him later. But that would be the last time he would hear from her. Sadly, that would be the last time anyone ever heard from her. At the time she went missing, she was staying at a motel in Hauppauge, New York, 15 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. Her body was recovered in December 2010. Waterman was a mother of one and had become a victim of sex trafficking. Waterman was 5 feet 5 inches tall and around 120 pounds. She was also a petite woman that fit the description of the other victims. Amber Costello was a 27-year-old woman that was born in Charlotte and raised in Wilmington, North Carolina. Costello started using heroin and other drugs in her teenage years and eventually began working as an escort to support her habit. She was living in West Babylon, New York, at the time of her disappearance, which was on September 2, 2010. West Babylon is a small town 10 miles north of Gilgo Beach. Sources say that on the night Costello allegedly went missing, she had went to meet a stranger that called her a few times offering her $1,500 for her services, which is more than 3 times the amount she charged her regular clients. At first, her family disregarded Costello's absence. They thought Costello had entered a rehabilitation center for drug addicts, which in turn delayed her from being reported as a missing person. Before moving to West Babylon, Costello had been living with her second husband in Clearwater, Florida, and was working as a waitress. Costello's drug addiction began when she was a teenager after she had been essayed by a neighbor when she was the tender age of 6 years old. Costello was 4 feet and 11 inches, and she weighed around 100 pounds. She was a perfect match when compared to the other victims' profiles. In the small communities around the Gilgo Beach area, the tragic news spread like wildfire. After the discovery of the Gilgo 4, the residents of Suffolk County were in a state of shock. The fact that they had a serial killer in their backyard was a terrifying realization that had everyone on edge. But the tragedies wouldn't stop there. The Gilgo 4 was just the beginning of the horrors yet to be uncovered. There had been whispers of what people referred to as the Long Island serial killer for years leading up to the discovery. But that's all they were, was stories. Right? Well, that was until 4 more sets of remains were discovered on March the 29th and April the 4th of 2011. The remains were discovered in another area off of the Parkway, by Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, about 2 miles east of the location where they uncovered the first set of remains that had been found back in December of 2010. The identity of the remains were as follows: Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, Jane Doe No. 3 or Peaches, and an unidentified toddler, who was later confirmed to be the daughter of Peaches. Valerie Mack was a 24-year-old escort that also went by the name Melissa Taylor. She was living in Philadelphia at the time of her disappearance back in early 2000. She was a very petite woman, just like most of the other victims, standing just 5 feet flat and weighing in at just 100 pounds. Some of Mack's partial remains were uncovered in Manorville on November the 19th of 2000, but were not identified until early 2020. Her torso was found wrapped up in garbage bags and dumped in the wooded area near the intersection of Halsey Manor Road and Mill Road, which was adjacent to a set of power lines and a nearby power line access road. A head, right foot, and hands were discovered on April the 4th of 2011, and were at first believed to have belonged to an unidentified victim, dubbed Jane Doe No. 6. But it was later confirmed that they belonged to the same woman whose torso had been found back in 2000. Her right foot had been cut off high above the ankle, possibly to conceal an identifying mark or tattoo on the victim's body. On May the 28th of 2020, police announced that the remains had been identified as Valerie Mack, who had last been seen by family members in the early summer months of 2000 in the area of Port Republic, New Jersey. The dismembered remains of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor were both disposed of in a similar manner, and in the same part of Manorville, suggesting that they may have been killed by the same person or person. Jessica Taylor was a 20-year-old escort that had been living in Manhattan at the time of her disappearance on July the 21st of 2003. Just 5 days would pass before her naked torso, missing its head and hands, had been found about 45 miles east of Gilgo Beach in Manorville, New York. DNA testing would confirm them to belong to Jessica Taylor later in the same year. Taylor's torso was found on top of a wood pile at the end of an access road, just north of where it crosses the Long Island Expressway. Also, plastic sheeting was found underneath the torso, and a tattoo on her body had been mutilated with an unknown sharp tool. More of Taylor's remains would also be discovered on March the 29th of 2011, which included her skull, both hands, and a forearm. Taylor would often escort out of both Manhattan and Washington, D.C. Taylor was last seen working around the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan between July the 18th and the 22nd of 2003. Karen Vergata was a 34-year-old woman from Manhattan. She was believed to have been working as an escort when she disappeared back in the early months of 1996. Vergata was unidentified, and only known as Jane Doe No. 7 for a long 27 years until she was finally publicly identified by Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney in late August of 2023. She had been officially identified in 2022 through genetic genealogy. Police uncovered Vergata's severed legs in a garbage bag on Fire Island on April the 20th of 1996. And then, almost 15 years later, on April the 11th of 2011, her skull and several of her teeth were found on Tobay Beach, and then the second set of remains would be uncovered in Nassau County, later that same day. These remains were linked through DNA analysis to the remains that were found on Fire Island, way back in 1996. Also discovered on April the 4th of 2011, was the body of a young Asian male who had died from blunt force trauma at Gilgo Beach, very close to where the Gilgo 4 had been discovered in December 2010. The victim was found in women's clothing and may have been a transgender woman. The victim was between 17 and 23 years of age, 5 feet 6 inches in height, and may have had a musculoskeletal disorder. It was also reported that the victim was missing 4 teeth. 2 further sets of remains were discovered on April 11, 2011, after the search expanded into Nassau County. They were found about 1 mile apart, about 5 miles west of those found back in December. One set of remains belonged to a victim now thought to be a transgender woman. Later would be known as unidentified Asian male. Police said that the victim had been dead for between 5 and 10 years. The other remains were those of Jane Doe No. 7, whose partial remains had been discovered on Fire Island back in 1996, but would later be confirmed to be Karen Vergata through DNA analysis. But sometimes DNA analysis just ain't enough to identify someone's remains. Even though DNA testing has came a long way over the years, it still isn't where we need it to be sometimes. With that being said, 3 of the victims remain unidentified to this very day. Baby Doe, Peaches, and Asian male. Peaches has been identified through DNA testing and is confirmed to be the mother of Baby Doe. On June the 28th of 1997, the torso of an unidentified African American woman was discovered in Hempstead Lake State Park, in the town of Lakeview, New York. The torso was in a green Rubbermaid container, which was thrown next to a road along the west side of the lake. Authorities said the victim's only identifiable mark was tattoo of a heart-shaped peach, with a bite taken out of it, thus giving her the name Peaches. On April the 11th of 2011, police in Nassau County discovered the dismembered skeletal remains of what they dubbed as Jane Doe No. 3 inside a plastic bag near Jones Beach State Park. But in early December 2016, Jane Doe No. 3 and Peaches were positively identified through DNA analysis as being the same person. DNA analysis also identified Peaches as the mother of Baby Doe. And Peaches and Baby Doe were also said to be wearing matching gold jewelry when the remains were recovered. The skeleton of a female toddler that was aged between 16 and 24 months was found on April 4, 2011, about 250 feet away from the partial remains of Valerie Mack. The body was wrapped in a blanket and showed no visible signs of injury. Not long after, found in a marsh, about a half a mile from where she had last been spotted, were the remains of Shannon Gilbert, found on December 13, 2011. A week earlier, some of her clothing and belongings had been recovered in the same area. Gilbert was last seen banging on the door and screaming for help before running off into the night. Gilbert made an emergency 911 call that night, saying that they are trying to kill her. However, the police had no idea who they were that she was referring to. But in May of 2012, the Suffolk County Medical Examiners ruled that Gilbert accidentally drowned after entering the marsh. They thought that she was in a drug-induced panic, and have concluded that she died as a result of death by misadventure or inconclusive. But her family and many others still believe she was murdered. On November 15th, of 2012, a lawsuit was filed by her mother, Mari Gilbert, against the Suffolk County Police Department in the hopes of getting more answers about the death of her daughter the night she made that terrified 911 call. And because of the controversy about Gilbert's death, in September of 2014, forensic pathologist Michael Baden agreed to conduct an independent autopsy of Gilbert's remains in hopes of determining a clear cause of death. Upon the examination of Gilbert's remains, Baden found significant damage to her hyoid bone, suggesting that strangulation may have occurred. Baden also noted that her body was found face up, which is not common for drowning victims. Despite this, her death is still officially listed as an accident to this very day. Authorities originally stated that the disappearance and death of Shannon Gilbert is what triggered the search where the first set of bodies were found, is unrelated to the Long Island serial killer case. Gilbert's now deceased mother Mari Gilbert advocated for the theory that her daughter had been murdered by a serial killer all along. At first police believed they had two different killers on their hands, mainly because of the similarities between the unidentified remains of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. But by November of 2011 the police announced that they believed one person committed all 10 slayings, and they also believed the suspect was a Long Island native. Also over the years there has been many other discoveries of remains in the surrounding areas that authorities are either unsure of or just are waiting on additional information and evidence to confirm a connection publicly to the case. Like the discovery of Jacqueline Smith. Smith was a 16-year-old girl that was last seen in Brooklyn, New York on August 7th of 1999. She had left her home around 9 p.m. to visit friends and never came home. She was reported missing on August 12th of 1999. Then on June 20th of 2000, an unidentified female torso was recovered near Beach 88th Street, in Rockaway Beach of Queens. The torso was found in plastic bags and wrapped with tape. No other body parts were discovered. The victim was later identified as Smith. Then just 2 years later, the torso of Andre Isaac was also recovered in Rockaway not far from where Smith was found. Andre Isaac was a professional drag queen known by his stage name Sugar Bear. He was 6 feet 5 inches tall and was 25 years old when he disappeared from East New York in November of 2002. According to his friend, Isaac was last seen shortly before Thanksgiving, getting into a car with a secret friend. The vehicle was described as a red BMW. Isaac's torso was found close to Beach 63th Street, in Arvin, Queens on December the 17th of 2002. Then on January the 25th of 2003, his head was discovered by people ice skating in East Mill Pond in Mauritius, New York in Suffolk County. Reports say his head had a single bullet wound to a temple. His arms and legs were later found several miles away in plastic bags. Isaac's case was added to the Suffolk County Police Department Gilgo News website on May the 29th of 2020. Another possible victim is Tanya Rush. Because on June the 23rd of 2008, Tanya Rush, 39, was last seen walking towards a subway station in Brooklyn around 3 a.m. And her dismembered body was found by a state road cleaning crew inside a black suitcase on June the 27th of 2008, on the Newbridge Road ramp leading to the westbound Southern State Parkway in Belmore, New York. Rush was a mother of 3. She had been a Salvation Army volunteer and also worked in telemarketing. She took up escorting to support her drug addiction. Also, authorities have questioned the link between the other cases and that of Natasha Gilgo. Gilgo was a 31-year-old woman that was last seen leaving her Queens Village, New York home on March the 16th of 2013 at 4:30 a.m. The next day, her wallet, identification, and some of her clothing were discovered thrown out along Ocean Parkway, close to Gilgo Beach. Also, Gilgo's 2009 Toyota Prius was found abandoned near the beach with footprints in the sand leading towards the water. Gilgo's body was eventually discovered floating in the water by beachgoers at 9:30 p.m. on June the 24th of 2013. Gilgo's body was the 11th human body to be found at Gilgo Beach since December 2010. Her body showed no obvious signs of trauma. The remains of Patricia Viola also showed similarities to the other victims in the case. Patricia Viola was a 42-year-old woman and a mother of 2 from Bogota, New Jersey. She stood 5 feet and 2 inches from the ground and weighed about 105 pounds. Matching the profile of the other victims. She was said to have vanished on February the 13th of 2001, and her partial remains were found in Rockaway Beach, Queens in July of 2002. Her body was later identified in late 2012. New Jersey would later create a new law in dedication to Viola called Patricia's Law, which bars police from refusing to accept missing person reports and requires them to notify a missing person's family of support services. Suffolk County Police Department announced a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest in the Long Island murders in early June of 2011. And over the years the department has gotten thousands of tips and leads, but most all of them were dead ends, and no one's ever claimed the reward money. Prosecutors suggested John Bitrolf, a carpenter from that town convicted of 2 other murders, might be responsible for some of the Gilgo Beach cases. No one knew that the real killer was still lurking right under their noses, living a normal life with normal friends. And after all the remains found in 2010 and 2011, the communities around the Gilgo Beach area would have to live in fear for more than 10 years until an arrest would be made. But it would take some changes to New York's justice system for that to happen. Something that would warrant the help from outside sources. And that change would come in the form of an indictment. Former Police Chief James Burke was indicted for civil rights violations and conspiracy. Burke, who resigned from the department in October 2015, was said to have been rejecting the help of FBI officials since the discovery of remains found back in December of 2010. The FBI officially joined the investigation as of December 10 of 2015. Just one day after Police Chief James Burke's indictment. The FBI had previously assisted in the search for victims but had never officially been a part of the investigation. Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy in November 2016. On September 12 of 2017, the Suffolk County prosecutor Robert Biancavilla said that John Bitrolf, a Suffolk County resident convicted of killing 2 sex workers, and suspected in killing a third, may have committed some of the Gilgo Beach killings. Bianca Villa said that Bitrolf was likely responsible for the deaths of other women and that there were similarities between the Gilgo Beach crime scenes and Bitrolf's known slaying, for which he was convicted in May of 2017 and sentenced in September of the same year. Bitrolf was arrested in 2014 after his DNA was found on the bodies of 2 victims, Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee, whose bodies were found in 1993 and 1994, respectively. The match had been made through DNA submitted by his brother, who was convicted in 2013 on an unrelated case. Bitrolf was convicted in May 2017 of these slayings, and in September sentenced to consecutive terms of 25 years for each victim. The Suffolk County Police did not comment on the prosecutor's statement due to the active homicide investigation of the Gilgo Beach murders. Bitrolf's attorney rejected the prosecutor's assertion. Bitrolf lived in Manorville, 30 miles from where the torsos of Gilgo Beach victims Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were recovered. Bitrolf was a hunter who was said to enjoy killing animals. He was a carpenter by trade with access to hacksaws and electric saws. Because many of the bodies were found precisely dismembered, his access to and proficiency with these tools was taken into consideration. The adult daughter of Rita Tangredi, who was murdered by Bitrolf, was also the best friend of Melissa Bartholomew, one of the Gilgo Beach victims. Bartholomew's mother said that her daughter Melissa had a lot of calls to Manorville from her phone before her death. And at the time most people thought they really may have got the right guy. They finally may have caught the elusive Long Island serial killer. Well, hold that thought. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you may only be halfway right. Hoyerman, a 59-year-old Nassau County resident, was arrested in Midtown, Manhattan and formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, as well as 3 counts of second-degree murder. The charges were related to the deaths of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also the number 1 suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Hoyerman pleaded not guilty. Hoyerman is an architect and has lived most of his life in Massapequa Park, on Long Island. Hoyerman stated he has worked in Manhattan since 1987. So how did Rex come across investigators' radars, you ask? Well, in 2022, investigators and prosecutors would work together with law enforcement to create the Gilgo Task Force to officially crack the case. A comprehensive review of evidence from the victims' cases led the investigation to begin a search for the owner of a Chevrolet Avalanche that investigators believed belonged to the killer. Because a witness identified the vehicle to be the same vehicle that Amber Costello was last seen entering the night of her disappearance. Based on the timing of their interaction, the task force knew that the driver of that car had to be her killer. They had a solid description from the witness, who also was Amber's pimp. The witness stated that a large, white man, approximately 6 feet 4 inches to 6 feet 6 inches in height, in his mid-40s, with dark bushy hair, and big oval-style 1970s type eyeglasses. But then, on March the 14th, of 2022, 2 months into the task force's investigation, they discovered a Chevrolet Avalanche that was registered to Rex Hoyerman at the time of the murders that matched the description perfectly. His physical description and age matched what the witness gave the police also. So from there, the task force initiated a comprehensive investigation consisting of a few hundred subpoenas, tons of search warrants, and other resources to obtain more information and evidence that would ultimately incriminate Rex. In July of 2022, about 4 months after learning of Hoyerman's identity and his ownership of a Chevrolet Avalanche, investigators took his wife's DNA off of bottles left outside their home in the trash. This was a huge step in confirming the identity of the female hairs found at the crime scene belonged to. Because female hair was found on Maureen Brainerd Barnes' remains, stuck to the buckle of one of the belts used to restrain her. Female hair was also recovered from duct tape used to bind Megan Waterman, and also inside the burlap wrapping near Amber Costello's head. Also, mitochondrial DNA testing indicated Hoyerman as a potential match when hair found on the burlap wrappings of one of the bodies was compared to a sample gleaned from a pizza crust in a box he had discarded. Also, according to investigators, his cell phone records indicate he had been in contact with 3 of the 4 victims, and an email account linked to Hoyerman had conducted online searches about the investigation's progress. And when you take a closer look at court records, it also indicated that he had searched the internet for sadistic materials, child pornography, and images of the victims and their relatives. Investigators also stated that his wife and children were out of state at the time during which the killings were believed to have occurred. With all that damning evidence, it's hard to believe Rex Hoyerman will be getting out of prison anytime soon. In conclusion, delving into the chilling case of the Long Island serial killer has provided us with a haunting glimpse into the depths of human darkness. This notorious unsolved mystery has left a lasting impact on both the victims' families and the wider community. By shedding light on these tragic events, we hope to raise awareness about the importance of justice, the pursuit of truth, and the need to protect the vulnerable. May our collective efforts continue to seek resolution and honor the memories of those whose lives were tragically cut short. As we remember the victims, let us also strive to create a safer future, where no one falls prey to the shadows that haunted Long Island for far too long. But even with all this evidence against Rex, there are so many questions that still linger in my mind. Yeah, I do believe he is responsible for some of the cases we talked about today, but I also think that Bitrolf is responsible for more of the slayings than he was convicted of. But who knows? I might be completely wrong. Maybe there is a third person who just managed to stay off the radar because of the other active killers that were working the same grounds. But what I really would like to know is what you think about this case, so go ahead and let us know in the comments below. Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you if you stuck around for the whole video. And if this is the kind of content you like to see, then why don't you do us both a favor and hit that subscribe button? Because we post a new video at least once a week. Well, that's all I got for this one, so until next time, case closed.